I see that, and you have a country right next door. So under the circumstances that we're negotiating a very comprehensive, complete deal, I think it's inappropriate to be having war games. So number one, we save money a lot. And number two, it really is something that I think they very much appreciated.
Does North Korea give you something in return, though? Well,
we've gotten, I've heard that. I mean, some of the people that, I don't know, maybe they really mean it. I don't always want to go against the press because I just don't, especially not today. This is too important. But I noticed that some of the people were saying that the president has agreed to meet. He has given up so much. I gave up nothing. I'm here. I haven't slept in 25 hours, but I thought it was appropriate to do because we've been negotiating for literally round the clock with them and with us and with John and with Mike and a whole team of very talented people. But we haven't given up anything other than, you're right, I agreed to meet. And I think the meeting was every bit as good for the United States as it was for North Korea. But I just wrote down some of the things we got. And they got a meeting. But only a person who dislikes Donald Trump would say that I've agreed to make a big commitment. Sure, I've agreed to take a period of time and come here and meet, and that's good. But I think it's great for us and as a country, and I think it's good for them. But what did they do to justify this meeting? Secured commitment for complete denuclearization. That's the big thing. They secured the release of 3 American hostages. They already gave them to us 2 months ago. These people are now living happily back in their homes with their families, and it was pretty rough for them, to put it mildly. Secured the commitment to recover the remains, including, these are of fallen heroes. And they're giving a commitment, they're starting it immediately, to recover the remains. And I just went through how many people asked me about it. I was amazed, actually. So many people would ask me, is it possible, is it possible? At that time, we had no relationship to Chairman Kim or to anybody else in North Korea. It was a very closed society. So we're getting the remains back. Secured the halt of all missile and nuclear tests. For how long has it been? 7 months? You haven't had a missile go up. For 7 months, you haven't had a nuclear test. You haven't had a nuclear explosion. I remember a nuclear event took place, 8.8 on the Richter scale. And they announced, I heard it on the radio, they announced that a massive, earthquake took place somewhere in Asia. And then they said it was in North Korea, and then they found out it was a nuclear test. I said, I never heard of a Richter scale in the high 8s. And if you look, there has been no missile launches. They've blown up their missile area. That's going to take place. That has not been written into the contract. We're going to give you the exact details on that. But they secured a halt of all missiles and of all nuclear tests. They secured the closure of their single primary nuclear test site, all 3 of them. They're in an area that's common around each other. They secured the closure. They secured the commitment to destroy the missile engine testing site. That was not in your agreement. I got that after we signed the agreement. I said, do me a favor. You've got this missile engine testing site. We know where it is because of the heat. It's incredible, the equipment we have, to be honest with you. I said, can you close it up? You're going to close it up. We maintain the ability to continue to apply sanctions. So we're applying sanctions. Now, I had 300 sanctions that I was getting ready to put on last week, and I said, I can't really put on sanctions when I'm meeting with, I thought it would be very disrespectful. 300 very big ones, powerful ones. And I said it would be disrespectful. So, Jennifer, when you look at all of those things that we got, and when we got our hostages back, I didn't pay $1.8 billion in cash, like the hostages that came back from Iran, which was a disgraceful situation, what took place. So we've gotten a lot. So when I hear somebody in the media say that President Trump has agreed to meet, like, it's not a big deal to meet. I think we should meet on a lot of different topics, not just this one. And I really believe a lot of great things can happen. Yes, go ahead, please.
Sir, you just listed off a lot of things that you say you got in this meeting. It wasn't too long ago, though, that you said you defined success of this meeting by North Korea giving up its nuclear weapons.
Well, that's what they're doing.
Well, can you talk about how
Sure,
you...
that's what they're doing.
Well,
I mean, I don't
how
think
you
the-
pressed
Yeah.
Kim Jong-un for a complete, verifiable, irreversible
Yeah, I did
denuclearization,
honestly-
and can you say why
Right.
you didn't secure those details in this agreement?
Because there's no time. I'm here one day. We're together for many hours intensively, but the process is going to take place. And I would be surprised, Mike, if they haven't even started already. They have started. They blew up their sites. They blew up their testing site. So, but I will say, he knew prior to coming, you know, this wasn't like a surprise. It wasn't like we'd never discussed it. We discussed it. Mike discussed it very strongly with his counterpart in North Korea. They knew that this was, let's say they didn't agree to that, I couldn't sign any agreement. There was no agreement that could have been signed. So they understood that. And it wasn't a big point today because really this had been taken care of more than any other thing because it was all about this. This has been taken care of before we got here. So when we brought that up today, you see the language, it's very strong. It's in the document. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. President. Could you talk about the military consequences for North Korea if they don't follow through on the commitments that you're talking about?
Well, I don't want to
Could there
talk.
be
Yeah, I
military
know. That's a
action?
tough thing to talk about because I don't want to be threatening. I don't want to be threatening. They understood that. And you've seen what was perhaps going to happen. And you know, Seoul has 28 million people. We think we have big cities. You look at New York where it has 8 million people. We think it's a big city. Seoul has 28 million people. Think of that. And it's right next to the border. It's right next to the DMZ. It's right there. I mean, if this would have happened, I think, you know, I've heard, 100,000 people. I think you could have lost 20 million people, 30 million people. This is really an honor for me to be doing this because I think, you know, potentially you could have lost, 30, 40, 50 million people. The city of Seoul, one of the biggest cities in the world, is right next to the border.
You once spoke about fire and fury. Is that no longer the case?
Well, at that time we needed perhaps fire and fury because we could not have allowed that kind of capability from the standpoint of the United States. And certainly Japan wasn't going to allow it either. Japan is right next door.
One more thing, Mr. President, could you tell us about the video that you showed before this?
Yeah.
When did you show that to Kim? What was the goal
Today.
there?
Yeah, we had it made up by some, I hope you liked it. I thought it was good. I thought it was interesting enough to show. One in English and one in Korean. And we had it made up. I showed it to him today, actually during the meeting, toward the end of the meeting. And I think he loved it. They were given, we didn't have a big screen like you have the luxury of having. We didn't need it because we had it on a cassette and an iPad, and they played it. And about 8 of their representatives were watching it, and I thought they were fascinated by it. I thought it was well done. I showed it to you because that's the future. I mean, that could very well be the future. And the other alternative is just not a very good alternative. It's just not good. But I showed it because I really want him to do something. Now, I don't think I had to show it because I really believe he wants to, I think he wants to get it done. Yes, go ahead. How's Staten Island Ferry doing, okay? He wrote the best story about me with the Staten Island Ferry, and after that, he's never written a good story.
It's a long time ago, sir.
I don't know what happened. It's a long time ago.
Mr. President, it's been a busy week for you on the international stage. You're leaving this summit here in Singapore having determined that Kim Jong-un is a talented man. You left the G7 summit a few days ago in Canada having determined that Prime Minister Trudeau is weak and dishonest. What do you say to America's allies who worry that you might be jeopardizing our long-term alliances and who worry that you might be treating our historic friends as enemies and our historic enemies as friends?
Well, first of all, I think it's a very fair question. I had a very good meeting with the G7, and I left the meeting, and I'll be honest, we are being taken advantage of by virtually every one of those countries, very, very seriously. Now, the United States, because of bad management at the top, because of presidents that didn't care about trade or didn't understand it or whatever reason, for many years, with China being obviously the most successful at it, but the European Union is second, 151 billion we lost. They were represented at the meeting. And we're being taken advantage of on trade. Canada does have very big advantages over us in terms of trade deficits. We have a big trade deficit with Canada. I was reading where, oh, it's actually a surplus. Not a surplus. It's either 17, but it could actually be 100. You know, they put out a document. I don't know if you saw it. They didn't want me to see it, but we found it. Perhaps they were trying to show the power they have. It's close to $100 billion a year loss with Canada. They don't take our farm products, many of them. They charge what was 270%, but somebody told me the other day that a few months ago they raised it to 295% for dairy products. And it's very unfair to our farmers, and it's very unfair to the people of our country, the workers, the farmers, the companies. And we are not able to trade. They have tremendous barriers up. They have tremendous tariffs. So when I put in a countervailing tariff just to get us up a little bit so the balance isn't so much, it's like this. They said, oh, that's so terrible. I said, what's terrible? We have to catch you a little bit. We have to have a little balance. Even if it's not complete, we have to have a little balance. I say this with many countries. Anyway, we finished the meeting. Really, everybody was happy. And I agreed to sign something. I asked for changes. I demanded changes, and those changes were made. In fact, the picture with Angela Merkel, who I get along with very well, where I'm sitting there like this, that picture was, we're waiting for the document because I wanted to see the final document as changed by the changes that I requested. That was a very friendly, I know it didn't look friendly, and I know it was reported like sort of nasty both ways. I was angry at her. Actually, we were just talking, the whole group, about something unrelated to everything, very friendly, waiting for the document to come back so I could read it before I leave. Anyway, I left and it was very friendly. When I got onto the plane, I think that Justin probably didn't know that Air Force One has about 20 televisions. And I see the television, and he's giving a news conference about how he will not be pushed around by the United States. And I say, push him around. We just shook hands. It was very friendly. Look, countries cannot continue to take advantage of us on trade. The numbers are out. Over the last couple of years, and over the last many years, but over the last couple of years, this country has lost $800 billion on trade with other countries, the biggest one being China. $800 billion. $151 billion with the European Union. They don't take our agricultural products, barely. They don't take a lot of what we have, and yet they send Mercedes into us. They send BMWs into us by the millions. It's very unfair. And it's very unfair to our workers, and I'm going to straighten it out, and it won't even be tough. Okay? Thank you. Go ahead. Go ahead. I would like to involve Congress, yes. And no, I have a good relationship with Justin Trudeau. I really did. Other than he had a news conference that he had because he assumed I was in an airplane and I wasn't watching. He learned that's going to cost a lot of money for the people of Canada. He learned. You can't do that. You can't do that. We left. We had a very good relationship. I've had a good relationship with Justin. I have a good relationship with all. I have a very good relationship with Angela Merkel. But on NATO, we're paying 4.2%. She's paying 1% of a much smaller GDP than we have. We're paying 4.2% on a much larger. We're paying for, I mean, anyone can say from 60 to 90% of NATO. And we're protecting countries of Europe. And then on top of it, they kill us on trade. So you just can't have it that way. It's unfair to our taxpayers and to our people. But no, I have a good relationship with Justin, and I have, I think, a very good relationship with Chairman Kim right now. I really do. I think, I hope it's good, because if it is, we're going to solve a very big problem. I think we've gone a long way to solving it today. Should we keep going for a little while? I don't know. It's up to the legendary Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Should we keep going, Sarah? Okay, we'll go. Well, I don't care. Hey, You know, it just means we get home a little later in the evening, right? Yeah, go ahead. Sure, go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, Mr. President.
How are you?
I'm
Nice-
good. From
nice
the
to see
Straits Times of Singapore. Welcome to the country.
Thank you very
I
much.
hope you enjoyed our food.
Beautiful country, I did.
I just wanted to find out, you described this as a process. What is the immediate next step? Is there some ongoing dialogue
Yes.
with the North
Oh, we're getting
Korean?
together next week to go into the details.
And that's our
Secretary
official
Pompeo,
level?
yeah, next week with John Bolton and our entire team to go over the details and to get this stuff done. We want to get it done. He wants to get it done.
All
We're
right.
also working very much with South Korea. We're working with Japan. We're working with China to a lesser extent, but we're working with China.
And you're coming back to Singapore?
I would come back gladly. Your prime minister was fantastic. We were with him yesterday. He's done a great job. It was very welcoming. It really probably it probably made a difference, actually. It's a great place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes, ma'am.
President.
Thank you, Mr. President. What was it about that first interaction with Chairman Kim this morning that made you decide not to walk away after you said that you would know within the first minute if he was sincere about
I've said that about
denuclearization?
relationships. I've said that about people. You know, in the first second, now I was generous, I said 5 seconds, but you know, in the first second, in some cases, sometimes that doesn't work out. But sometimes it does. From the beginning, we got along. But there's been a lot of groundwork. This wasn't like we went and we started talking about, as you know, right? We didn't just come in and start talking about these very complex subjects that have been going on for 70 years. We've been discussing this for months. And, you know, once the rhetoric stopped, once they did a great thing. You know, North Korea did a great thing by going to the Olympics, because the Olympics, and President Moon will tell you this, the Olympics was not exactly doing great. People didn't feel like being bombed out of the opening ceremonies. You know, they weren't exactly selling tickets. And as soon as the Chairman Kim, said, let's participate in the Olympics, it sold like wildfire and was a great success as an Olympics. It was a great success. He did a great thing. But since that time, pretty much since that time, because as you know, a delegation came from South Korea who had just met with North Korea. They came to the White House. They told me lots of things, including the fact that they'd be willing to denuke. We have one of their great people here today, that they were willing to denuke. And once that started, we have been really talking about that from the end of the Olympics, when the whole delegation came to say various things, including denuking.
If I may, a second question. In the document that you signed earlier today, North Korea agreed to commit to denuclearization. To borrow a phrase that you have used to criticize your predecessors and political opponents, how do you ensure that North Korea is not all talk, no action
Well,
going
I think,
forward?
can you ensure anything? Can I ensure that you're going to be able to sit down properly when you sit down? I mean, you can't ensure anything. All I can say is they want to make a deal. That's what I do. My whole life has been deals. I've done great at it. And that's what I do. And I know when somebody wants to deal, and I know when somebody doesn't. A lot of politicians don't. That's not their thing. But it is my thing. I mean, again, this really could have been done, I think, easier a long time ago. But I know I just feel very strongly, my instinct, my ability or talent, they want to make a deal. And making a deal is a great thing for the world. It's also a great thing for China, because I can't imagine that China is happy with somebody having nuclear weapons so close. So, China was very helpful. So I think he wants to make a deal. Can anybody be certain? But we're going to be certain soon, because the negotiations continue. Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead.
You mentioned that you have raised extensively the issue of human rights with Chairman
Yes.
Kim. I wonder what you would say to the group of people who have no ability whatsoever to hear or to see this press conference, the 100,000 North Koreans kept in a network of gulags. Have you betrayed them by legitimizing the regime in Pyongyang?
No, I think I've helped them, because I think things will change. I think I've helped them. There's nothing I can say. All I can do is do what I can do. We have to stop the nuclearization. We have to do other things, and that's a very important thing. So at a certain point, hopefully you'll be able to ask me a much more positive question or make a statement. But not much I can do right now. At a certain point, I really believe he's going to do things about it. I think they are one of the great winners today, that large group of people that you're talking about. I think ultimately they're going to be one of the great winners as a group. Yes, sir, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Would you ever consider removing the sanctions without significant improvement in the human rights situation?
No, I want significant improvement. I want to know that it won't be happening. And again, once you start that process, there'll be a point at which, even though you won't be finished for a while because it can't happen scientifically or mechanically, but you're not going to be able to go back. You know, once we reach that point, I'll start to give that very serious thought. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. You first.
Mr. President, did you also discuss the cost of denuclearization and how North Korea is about to foot the bill while the crippling sanctions remain in place? I'm from Channel News Asia, Singapore.
Well, I think that South Korea and I think that Japan will help them very greatly. I think they're prepared to help them. They know they're going to have to help them. I think they're going to help them very greatly. We won't have to help them. The United States has been paying a big price at a lot of different places, but South Korea, which obviously is right next door, and Japan, which essentially is next door, they're going to be helping them, and I think they're going to be doing a very generous job and a terrific job. So they will be helping them. And yes, ma'am, go ahead behind. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
I'd like to follow up on Steve's question. He asked you how long it would take to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. You said a long time. What does that mean?
Well, I don't know when you say a long time. I think we will do it as fast as it can be done scientifically, as fast as it can be done mechanically. I don't think, I mean, I've read horror stories. It's a 15-year process, okay? Assuming you wanted to do it quickly, I don't believe that. I think whoever wrote that is wrong. But there will be a point at which, when you're 20% through, you can't go back.
And how long will
I
it
had
take?
an uncle who was a great professor for, I believe, 40 years at MIT. And I used to discuss nuclear with him all the time. He was a great expert. He was a great, brilliant genius, Dr. John Trump at MIT. I think he was there 40 years, I was told. In fact, the head of MIT sent me a book on my uncle. But we used to talk about nuclear. You're talking about a very complex subject. It's not just like, oh, gee, let's get rid of the nukes. It takes a period of time. But the main period of time that I'm talking is that first period. When you hit a certain point, you can't go back. It's very hard to go back.
And how long will that take?
We don't know, but it'll go pretty quickly. Go ahead. Sure.
Thanks, Mr. President. I wanted to ask again on the sanctions campaign. You alluded at the very beginning that the Chinese are not doing as great a job securing the border as they were before. You expressed, some doubts when Kim went to see President Xi. The Russian foreign minister was in Pyongyang and said there shouldn't be any sanctions while these negotiations are underway. And the South Koreans are now talking about restoring some form of trade. So with all of those players appearing to be moving toward eroding sanctions, how can you keep the sanctions regime in place? What leverage do you have on these countries?
Well, I think we have a lot of leverage. I think we have tremendous leverage. I do believe that China, despite my relationship with President Xi, a man who I told you I have great respect for and like also a lot, we're having very tough talks on trade. And I think that probably affects China somewhat, but I have to do what I have to do. And I think over the last 2 months, the border is more open than it was when we first started. But that is what it is. We have to do it. We have a tremendous, tremendous deficit in trade, commonly known as a trade deficit. We have a tremendous deficit in trade with China. We have to do something about it. We can't continue to let that happen. And I think that has had an impact on my relationship in terms of the border. I don't think it has a relationship, I don't think it affects my feeling or my relationship to President Xi, but when we first started, we weren't ready to go that route. And as we started preparing and getting ready to do that, I think that's had an impact on, frankly, the border, which is a shame, but I have to do it. I have no choice. For our country, I have to do it. South Korea will do whatever's necessary to get a deal done. If that means we can't trade, they're not going to trade. They're definitely not going to trade. if they think, and they would do this with our concurrence, if they think that they can do some work because we're very far down the line. We're actually very far. You know, that document, when you read it today, that's far down the line. That's not something that just happened to be put together. This was done over months. And again, the rhetoric was important and the sanctions were important. I don't even know which one was more important. They were both important. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. President, David Sanger for the New York Times. I was wondering if you could give us some sense of whether the Chairman Kim told you how many nuclear weapons he believes he's made, whether he's willing to turn those over first, and then whether in your mind you need to do more than was done in the Iran deal for actually dismantling the both the uranium and the plutonium processes, and whether or not you had a sense that Chairman Kim really understood what that involves and had a timetable in his own mind of shutting that.
Well, David, I can tell you he understands. He understands it so well. He understands it better than the people that are doing the work for him. That is an easy one. As far as what he has, it's substantial, very substantial. The timing will go quickly. I believe you'll see some good action. I mean, as an example, one of the things with the missile set, I think you're probably surprised to hear that. That was a throw-in at the end, the missile set. But I really believe, David, that it's going to go very quickly. I really believe that it's going to go fast. And it is a very substantial arsenal. There's no question about it. You know, I used to say, maybe it's all talk and no action. But we have pretty good intelligence into that, although probably less there than any other country. You understand that maybe better than anybody in the room. Probably less there than any other country, but we have enough intelligence to know that what they have is very substantial. This is why, David, I always say that this shouldn't have taken place so late into the process. Wouldn't this have been better if it was 5 years ago or 20 years ago or 15 years ago and we didn't have to worry about not having a successful meeting like today? So, and I still love my first interview with you, David. I still have that interview, actually. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
My question is, if there is a second summit, that's okay. If there is a second summit with the Chairman Kim Jong-un, will it be in Pyongyang or Washington?
We haven't set that up. We'll probably need another summit. We'll probably need, or meeting, we could use a different term, but we'll probably need another one. We'll probably, I will say this, we're much further along than I would have thought. I did not think we'd be here. I thought, and I've told people, I didn't want to build up people's hopes too much. I told people, I thought that this would be a successful meeting if we got along, we developed a relationship, and we could have maybe gotten to this point in 3 or 4 months from now. But it really happened very quickly. A lot of that was because of the foundation that was, you know, put down before we met. A lot of things happened very fast. We didn't have, as an example, bringing back the remains. That was not one of the things that was on our agenda today. I brought it up at the very end because so many people had talked to me about it. And I brought it up at the very end, and he was really very gracious. Instead of saying, well, let's talk about it the next time, he said, it makes sense, we will do it. And he knew, you know, they know where many of those incredible people are, where they're buried, along roads, along highways, along paths, usually, because our soldiers were moving back and forth and they had to move rapidly. It's very sad. But he knew, and that was brought up at the very end. And, you know, it was really great that he was able to do it. A lot of people are going to be very happy about that. Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Emerald Robinson, One American News. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you for the nice way you treat us. We appreciate it. Really, it's very good. It's really beautiful what you do. Go ahead.
So you
And now I'll probably get this killer question.
Well, I do want to talk about the future of North Korea.
It's all right.
Specifically the people. Kim Jong-un is saying he's wanting a brighter future with prosperity for his people, yet we know they've lived under oppression. You showed him this video of what the future could be like. But do you have an idea specifically of the model that he would like to go towards? Economically, is he open to more economic freedom?
It's a good question. So you saw a tape today. and that I think was done really well, but that was done at the highest level of future development. I told him, you may not want this. You may want to do a much smaller version of this. I mean, you're going to do something, but you may want to do a smaller version. You may not want that with the trains and the everything, you know, super, everything the top. And maybe you won't want that. It's going to be up to them. It's going to be up to them. It's going to be up to the people what they want. They may not want that. I can understand that too. But that was a version of what could happen, what could take place. As an example, they have great beaches. You see that whenever they're exploding their cannons into the ocean, right? So I said, boy, look at that bridge. Wouldn't that make a great condo behind? And I explained, I said, you know, instead of doing that, you could have the best hotels in the world right there. Think of it from a real estate perspective. You have South Korea, you have China, and they own the land in the middle. How bad is that, right? It's great. But I told them, I said, you may not want to do what's there. You may want to do a smaller version of it, or, you know, and that could be. Although I tell you what, he looked at that tape, he looked at that iPad, and I'm telling you, they really enjoyed it, I believe, okay? Yeah, go ahead. A couple of more. Okay, we'll do 3 more. Yeah, go ahead, go.
Brian Bennett from Time Magazine.
Yes, hi, Brian.
Do you
Am I
now
on the cover
see-
again this week? Boy, have I been so many
It's entirely
covers.
possible.
Huh? I know. That's
Do you
okay.
now see Kim Jong-un as an equal?
In what way?
You just showed a video that showed you and Kim Jong-un on equal footing in discussing the future of the
No,
country.
I think that I don't view it that way. See, I don't view it that way. I'll do whatever it takes to make the world a safer place. If I have to say I'm sitting on a stage, I mean, I understand what you're getting at. If I have to say I'm sitting on a stage with Chairman Kim, and that's going to get us to save 30 million lives, could be more than that, I'm willing to sit on the stage. I'm willing to travel to Singapore very proudly, very gladly. Again, you know, other than the fact that it is taking my time, they have given up a tremendous amount. They've given it up even before, and even add the Olympics to it. You know, you could add the Olympics to the question. They went to the Olympics. They took an Olympics that was going to be a massive failure, that maybe wouldn't have even opened. And they made it a tremendous success by agreeing to participate. Add that to the list of things that they've done. So, Brian, if I can save millions of lives by coming here, sitting down, and establishing a relationship with someone who's a very powerful man, who's got firm control of a country, and that country has very powerful nuclear weapons, it's my honor to do it.
Are you concerned that the video you just showed could be used by Kim as propaganda to show him as
No, I'm not concerned at all. We can use that video for other countries. Go ahead.
Mr. President, in the year 2000, President Clinton got a request by Kim Jong-il.
Got impressed?
Got a request from Kim Jong-il to travel to Pyongyang and meet him. And Clinton refused. He sent the Secretary of State Albright.
Yeah, he did a great deal. And he spent $3 billion and got nothing. They started making nuclear weapons.
Mr. President, and you, on the other hand, got the request and right away went here to meet him. And do you understand those people who say that you gave him the ultimate present, a legitimacy to a regime who oppress its people without an ongoing process before you, as a US president, as the leader of the free world, meet, shake hands with this leader of North Korea who is perceived to be oppressing brutally his own people?
Okay, good. I think we just answered the
But
question.
do you understand these people?
I understand it much better than you do. Okay, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thanks, Mr. President. Eliana Johnson with
Sure.
Politico.
Hi.
Hi. You mentioned a couple specific concessions that you got from Kim, the return of remains and the destruction of the nuclear site. and I know you said that was
And
an
much
add-on.
more, and much more than that.
Yeah, I know you said the last thing was an add-on and it wasn't in the agreement, but that he gave you his word. If he doesn't follow through on these things, what are you prepared to do in response, and will you lose faith in this process?
No, I think he'll do it. I really believe that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this. I really believe, and it was really the engine testing site, in addition to all of the other things that they've agreed to do. It was they have a very powerful engine testing site that, again, we're able to see because of the heat that it emits. And yeah, I'm able to, I'm very happy. I'll tell you what, I'm very happy with those 2 points, the 2 points you mentioned, but I think you might be referring to the thing that's not in, which is the engine testing site. Honestly, I think he's going to do these things. I may be wrong. I mean, I may stand before you in 6 months and say, hey, I was wrong. I don't know that I'll ever admit that, but I'll find some kind of an excuse. Okay, one more. Come on.
But
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, sure.
Thanks, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jennifer Chen with Shenzhen Media Group China. I just would like to know, will you call Chinese President Xi when you come back to D.C.
Yes.
To discuss about achievements you made today with
Yes.
Chairman Kim? And
I will.
what's your expectation about China's role to accelerate the process to establish the long-term peace mechanism?
Well, my expectation about China is that China is a great country with a great leader and a friend of mine. And I really believe that he's happy that we've made this kind of progress. And I've heard from him. But I will be calling him very shortly, maybe even before I land. Okay? And I have to say, and the United States is a great country. And we have set records economically, over $7 trillion in net worth addition to what we have. And we are almost twice the size of the economy of the United States. Nobody talks about this because you do hear a lot about China, rightfully so. But the United States now is almost twice the size of the economy of China. We have a great country, and we're on a correct path. Okay, one more, that'll be it. Oh, South Korea? Where's South Korea? I think you deserve, go ahead, go. You deserve one, yes. You deserve one.
I've got two questions for you, Mr. President. First, you mentioned earlier that you're going to talk with South Korean President Moon Jae-in over the
Yes.
phone. What do you plan to discuss with him?
I just want to tell him about the meeting, very successful, and he'll be very much involved in the final negotiation. He's a very, very fine gentleman, also a friend of mine, and I look forward to speaking to him. He'll be very happy when he hears about, I've already sent word to him about what happened. I sent the document to him, actually, and all of the details behind the document. So I'll be talking to him very shortly.
If I may ask another question, in signing the peace treaty, do you plan to work this out with North Korea's Chairman Kim only, or what do you think about the involvement of South Korea and China as the signatories?
I'd like to have them involved also. There's a
Like both
question
of
as
them,
to
both of
whether or
them.
not we're supposed to or whether or not we legally have to. I don't care. I think it would be great to have China involved and also, of course, South Korea. Okay?
Thank you.
What? Mike, do they have a transcript? They probably have a rough transcript, which you can give us if you have one. No, they didn't record it. I don't think they recorded it. Are there any recordings of it? I wish there were, because it is interesting stuff. Say it. I don't. We probably have some notes or something, but they have actually detailed notes, I would imagine. But we had a great conversation. It was a very heartfelt conversation. Yeah, well, I don't have to verify because I have one of the great memories of all time, so I don't have to. Okay. Okay. Yeah, but I don't want to discuss it. But what we did is we've had numerous discussions. We've had very important relationships established at Mike's level and other levels. In fact, a couple of people are here from, as you know, from North Korea. They're in the room. We have a few people in the back also from the room. So when we went into this final agreement, very importantly, we really didn't go in cold. We went in with tremendous relationship and tremendous knowledge, and I think that's why we got it done. So I'm going to head back. I don't know about you folks, but it's been a long time since I've taken it easy, so now we can take it a little bit easy, and then the work begins again. And I appreciate everybody being here. I hope we've answered your questions. And thank you very much. And sort of congratulations to everybody, because this is a really, to me, it's a very important event in world history. And to be really true to myself, I have to add, I want to get it completed. So Mike, our whole team has to get to work and get it completed, because otherwise we've done a good job. But if you don't get the ball over the goal line, it doesn't mean enough, okay? So thank you, and sort of congratulations to everybody in the room. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
President Trump wrapping up a 1 hour and 5 minute news conference in Singapore following his historic meeting with Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader. He called the meeting intensive, direct, productive. He also said they reached a comprehensive agreement. But as we sit here, there are serious questions about whether that agreement is, in fact, comprehensive, whether it, in fact, moved the ball forward at all. What we do know, what we learned just moments ago, is that the White House made a major concession to North Korea on the idea of joint military exercises in South Korea. Our Jim Acosta was in the room for this news conference. Let's go straight to him. Jim, what do you make of it?
Well, you heard the president say during this pretty long and wide-ranging press conference that he didn't make any concessions to Kim Jong-un, that he gave up nothing, he said, to Kim Jong-un, when in fact he did give up something fairly significant, and that is these joint military exercises that have been conducted for years with the South Koreans that have acted as a deterrent to North Korea. You'll have a whole range, I'm sure, of foreign policy, national security, military experts who will tell you, John, over the next several hours as we dissect this press conference, that that's actually a very significant concession. The president trying to paint it as if it was nothing. That's obviously not the case. But, of course, you heard the president say during this press conference, I thought it was a pretty astonishing admission that he made at the very end of this press conference, that, he may come back in 6 months and say that, this was all a mistake, but that he'll have at that point, if that's the case. But I think what you heard from the president during this news conference, and I asked this question very early on in the press conference, do you trust Kim Jong-un? John, I think this just comes down to a matter of trust. He trusts the North Korean dictator. You could put this side by side with some of the comments that he made about the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. This is a president who is putting a lot of faith in somebody who has been a brutal dictator for years in his own country, has murdered family members, has imprisoned tens of thousands of people. But for whatever reason, because of that phone call that he acknowledged at the very end of this news conference, and then this summit that lasted all day long, he's somehow established this relationship with Kim Jong-un that has allowed him to take this leap of faith that we're going to see materialize potentially in some kind of agreement, a binding agreement. We obviously didn't have that today. That will eventually lead to Kim Jong-un and the North Koreans giving up their nuclear arsenal. And I'm being told, John, if I want to catch my ride on Air Force One, I better send it back to you.
Right. You don't want to miss that ride. Jim Acosta, we will let you go and chase the president. No one chases him better. Thanks so much for being with us. Want to bring back senior White House correspondent Jeff Zeleny. Also with us, CNN Global Affairs analyst Ambassador Joseph Yoon, who, of course, is a former special U.S. representative for North Korean policy. I believe we also have with us our chief international correspondent, Christian Amanpour. Christian, let me start with you. Again, thank you so much for being with us. The president held this remarkable 1 hour and 5 minute news conference, answering more questions in one place than he's answered really in well over a year. But the key question here is, what did he get out of this meeting, out of this 5 hour meeting with Kim Jong-un? He says he has a comprehensive agreement. He signed a comprehensive statement. Did he?
You know, John, I'm one of those people who really hoped that this would go well, that we could come back with some tangible benefit, and that this would end this state of real sort of tension and conflict and uncertainty in this region and for the world. But I listened to every minute of that 1 hour plus press conference, and all I can say from my perspective is that I found it rambling, I found it at times incoherent, I found it giving away more than having got, and I found it mostly on a wing and a prayer and a wishful thinking. He did not get what even he said that he wanted, and that even on the eve of this summit, his Secretary of State said that he wanted, which was complete, verifiable, irreversible commitment to denuclearization and disarmament. He gave up the thing that's been going on for decades, which are the joint military exercises, and he even denigrated his own country's joint military exercises, calling them provocative, saying that the bombers were having to fly for 6 hours plus from Guam. It was so expensive, it was so unnecessary. Why do we need to do that? But the thing that really worries me is, are we going ahead now with anything concrete that both sides can work on? Or are we going ahead with just some hopeful, wishful thoughts? And I find that incredibly worrying, incredibly depressing. And as I said, I found it very difficult to connect all the threads of what President Trump was saying over that 1 hour and 5 minutes.
Again, the president did say that the United States will stop the joint military exercises that it has conducted for decades with South Korea. Let's listen to what the president said on that.
We will be stopping the war games, which will save us a tremendous amount of money, unless and until we see that the future negotiation is not going along like it should. But we'll be saving a tremendous amount of money. Plus, I think it's very provocative.
Again, Ambassador Yoon is with us now. You obviously have studied this and been involved with this for many years. That's a concession. We just learned that that happened right there. Also, this language inside this statement, this joint statement that they signed, it says Chairman Kim Jong-un reaffirmed his firm and unwavering commitment to complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Reaffirmed what he's been saying all along. That may not be the promise that the U.S. really wanted.
No, we were looking for a lot more than the past language of reaffirming. So I think, you know, it falls way short of expectations. So it really does beg the question, what happens next? And I must say, you know, we need more details. Even the one you mentioned, stopping joint exercise. Is it all joint exercise? Then it begs the question. The readiness is very important to our troops. If they're not prepared, they're not ready, why are they there? So, I mean, you know, it could be joint exercise for the rest of the year. Joint exercise is upcoming in August. So we need more questions. And he also said next week they will start immediate meetings to implement this declaration. What level? Is it about denuclearization? Is it about peace regime? So there are a lot of gaps here, and I think we need to get a lot more of what happened, what was committed. Is there anything more that we gave to North Koreans beyond joint exercise?
Were you surprised by the joint exercises?
I was very surprised because, you know, I think Jim was right. Going in, President has said, we will give nothing. We have given nothing. But apparently, we have given one thing that is very important, and it has huge implications for our alliance.
Jeff Zeleny, again, I don't want to put myself in the president's head. I don't know for sure what he is thinking. But he seemed confident there during that news conference. He spoke for an hour and 5 minutes in a way that he generally only does if he's feeling good about himself. He thinks, to me, it looks as if he thinks he got something out of here. I wonder if he will be surprised by the analysis.
John, I think he will be surprised by the analysis. I think the president was in a bubble today, and he was watching all of this unfold around him. And it was extraordinary what was happening, that he was caught up, I think, in the history of the moment, that he was the first U.S. president sitting down with a dictator from North Korea. But I think at the end of the day here, as we sort of watch his mindset, I believe that Kim Jong-un flattered him in an incredible way. And he's walking away thinking that he, won some big achievement today. And I do not believe that he did. And I think he'll be surprised by the reaction to the The joint military exercises, first and foremost, we hear this president talk all the time about how he is building the biggest, most robust military. I'll be very surprised if his defense secretary, if he knew about this, James Mattis, if he'll be pleased by this, what Republicans and conservatives will say. But I think overall, when you sort of step back and see what happened here in Singapore, I think the president elevated Kim Jong-un to an incredible level here, and he is putting so much faith in trust without anything on paper. I think he will be surprised that this will not be as viewed as positively when he gets back to Washington or even in that airplane as he sees it right now in the moment.
As much progress, certainly, as he thinks. I'm very interested in this notion that you think that Kim flattered the president, impressed the president. We heard the president use phrases that Kim is very talented, and that specifically was a response to a question about human rights and human rights abuses. Let's listen to the president when he brought up or was pressed on the issue of human rights.
And I believe it's a rough situation over there. There's no question about it. And we did discuss it today pretty strongly. I mean, knowing what the main purpose of what we were doing is, denuking, but discussed it at pretty good length. We'll be doing something on it. It's rough. It's rough in a lot of places, by the way. Not just there, but it's rough. And we will continue that, and I think ultimately we'll agree to something. But it was discussed at length outside of the nuclear situation, one of the primary topics.
So, Cristiano Amanpour, President Trump does say he brought up human rights. He previously in this news conference said it was brought up briefly, clearly not the main thrust of this, but in a way equivocating on Kim's human rights record. Says, yeah, it's rough in North Korea, but it's rough in a lot of places. That is starkly different language, by the way, than President Trump has used. But certainly, you know, President George W. Bush, human rights in North Korea was an obsession of his. This seems to be lowering the temperature on U.S. concern over human rights on the peninsula.
Yes, indeed. And to say it's rough in a lot of places when the international community believes that it's the roughest, the worst, the most draconian in North Korea is again to equivocate. And of course, look, the fact of the matter is that he probably did mention it, but it is true that the denuclearization process was meant to be the biggest. That was the big thing to get their arms around, and human rights would come later. And that has been, it happened during the South Korea-North Korea summit, the same thing. They didn't really focus on human rights. It was about denuclearization. But here's the thing, he didn't get, or at least he didn't tell us he got, and it wasn't written in the declaration or the statement, any sense from them of a declaration of the weapons they had, of the missiles they had, of the commitment to tell him and the rest of the international community in the IAEA where they were so they could be verified, at least taken stock of. Forget dismantling, at least taken stock of. None of that, apparently. He was asked specifically, did they tell you about their nuclear stockpile? And he just said it's substantial. He didn't really answer that question. So that, again, is a missed opportunity. And again, the idea of not coming out with a declaration that the other side was willing to really denuclearize itself rather than the whole Korean peninsula. We know what that means, the whole Korean peninsula. And again, I would ask Joseph and Jeff and you all, was what happened today any different than various declarations that have been issued, let's say in 92, 93, by the United States, by South Korea? It seemed very, very much the same, specifically from the North Korean perspective.
No, in fact, you go back to the 94 agreed framework, which is something that people often talk about here. I just looked at some of the language. It is remarkably similar to what we have seen today. And again, on the issue of verification, which would be one step, Ambassador, where it would take it even further, you know, the president really offered no specifics there at all. He said, yeah, we're going to verify it. We'll have people on the ground, Americans and others, but that's hardly specific.
I think Christian has an excellent point. And this is not very different. I would say not different at all from what we have had in the past. Clearly, what President Trump wants to convey is that there has been a summit-level commitment from leader to leader. Now, time will tell, but right now, I share Christian's disappointment that we have not gotten much to show for the expectations that they've all built up.
Can I ask you, because you've been on the ground there dealing directly with the North Koreans, do you trust Kim as much as the president seems to trust him today?
No, you cannot trust his words. I think Jeff made a great point. Flattery, I do believe, played a huge role, you know? And so I think, you know, in a meeting, it is easy to say, I've made contact. You know, we get along. But that's not a strategy. That is not a strategy. Where is national interest? Where is denuclearization? And so you can see this, I would say, you know, almost Kim Jong-un gaming it out. I'll get over this. He will accept me. I bought myself more time. Let's see what happens, you know?
And we say it's the same as 94, but the situation is different. The nuclear program is much more advanced.
Oh, much. They have
in 2018 than 1994. So that is the context, I think, which we have to look at it in. So I was astonished by that. But I do think now the onus and the pressure and challenges on Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to work out the details, and other voices in the administration who prefer a harder line like John Bolton. This could be a defining moment, I think. If the president suddenly sees himself being criticized for being too weak, he is very responsive to what outsiders and people he respects think of him. This I think, makes Mike Pompeo's job perhaps even harder today.
He's got his work cut out for him. Christian, I do want to ask you, because the president says that he has received concessions from North Korea over time. He got U.S. hostages back from North Korea. North Korea hasn't tested missiles in some months. There's been no nuclear tests in some months. Those two things and the return of the hostages, that's all undeniably good. That creates an environment that is, you know, substantially better than what it was when they were insulting each other. You know, so to an extent, was it worth it? The president actually had a great line. If I can read it here, he says, I'll do whatever I have to do to make the world a safer place. Was it worth sitting on the stage with Kim? The president said, I'll do whatever I have to do to make the world a safer place.
Look, it is much, much better to talk than to war, for sure. But everybody has been asking themselves, what happens if this summit falls short? What is the default action? What do you do next? Can you keep the sanctions pressure up? Are you forced to go back to some kind of military rhetoric or whatever? Have you actually given him what you said you were going to do? Some kind of declaration that we would seek to end the war? All of those things that you mentioned, giving up the hostages or giving them back, the freeze on the nuclear tests, and indeed the intercontinental ballistic missiles test, and destroying in front of the press at least what we could see, the visible exterior of the nuclear test site that Will Ripley and others went and showed to the world. That was in order to get this meeting. That was in order to get this meeting, and it was good, and it's great, but what happens next? What happens next? And I think that, you know, go back to a previous Republican president, Ronald Reagan, who freaked out the whole arms control world for so long, the anti-nuclear world for so long, but he, you know, engaged with a mighty enemy, the Soviet Union at that time, and he was, you know, we could talk about what happened at Reykjavik when the summit kind of collapsed over a lack of knowledge of the brief, but he always said, trust but verify, trust but verify. The verify is missing from today's meeting. As far as we know, there is no verify. And I think that's a really important thing to take forward. And it's even less than we expected on the eve of this summit, where already expectations had been lowered from the week before, the 2 weeks before, the months before.
Christian, Ambassador Yun, Jeff, stand by. The president on his way now to Air Force One, on his way back to the United States. How will he interpret how this meeting is being analyzed? A key question. In the meantime, let's go back to Christine Romans and Dave Briggs in New York. Guys.
Thanks, John. What a remarkable hour and 5 minutes of the president.
For a man who turned 72 on Thursday, the stamina is staggering. Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. President Trump holding that whirlwind news conference. It's his first in 16 months, more than an hour answering questions.
He accomplished something.